It has indeed been a long, cold winter this week, friends. Those of you who know might have heard Spalding the parrot Spalding the bird. I'm not sure if he's a parrot. Joining in as the fifth spirit. But a friend and I were driving the other day, and we remarked how similar this week felt to some winters actually back in the Northeast. We were both wearing jackets, which seemed strange, and we were bundling up, wearing layers, and there's lots and lots and lots of rain. And then losing power this week for many of us was also a reminder of what life was like where many of us grew up. But we know the sun will come again, as it has this morning. Even this week, there are periods of such beauty in this land again. Sun, 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 here it comes. This week marks historic rainfall, to be sure. But it marks more than that. You might remember where you were when the reality of a lockdown, of a closing of businesses, of blocking of flights came to these islands. I remember where I was. It's not hard to recall because I was in a hot tub, actually, at Turtle Bay Resort, to be totally transparent. See, a friend of mine and a friend of this congregation who's visited a number of times was with me visiting that whole week. And he was relaxing from a rigorous course of study and work, and we decided kind of on a whim to check out Turtle Bay. It was kind of rainy up there that weekend. It was the second weekend of March, and already we were getting reports that parts of the United States were shutting down or canceling flights. I kind of selfishly hoped, for my friend's sake, that flights would get canceled so he'd have to stay in Hawaii for a while before returning to work. So we were in the hot tub listening to people from all over the world who were staying at the resort tell their stories about getting there. I remember a notice when we went into the room under the door as we walked in, and the notice said that a patron of Turtle Bay a few weeks earlier had tested positive for the virus. It was certainly interesting to read. He being a doctor, we didn't care too much about it, but it was the closest at that point I'd come to COVID. Of course, later that night, maskless, I sang Billy Joel, Michael Jackson, and Bon Jovi at one of the best karaoke bars I think might have ever been around there up on the North Shore. Even telling this story, now remembering sharing of the microphones, passing within inches of other bar patrons, and people singing right in your face almost scares me. And that was just a year ago. I did not get it. I left Turtle Bay early, though, when the news in Hawaii came that the stay-at-home orders were coming. I returned home and started responding to the best information we had. After some website updates, some replanning of worship, and some prayer, we were ready to go. You might remember Reverend Sarah Kane was preaching for us, and she had the capability to preach by Zoom, so we had a Zoom service. Stuart and my friend who was visiting came to church here and set up our first service on Zoom. The hastily sketched sign on the church big sliding doors explained that worship would be online, and the sign was recently replaced by our wonderful and amazing aesthetics team. But the original had my friend's handwriting, and for almost a year, it was kind of nice to see it there, reminding me of the role he played in getting our first online service up and running. That was March 15th, 2020. I hadn't even figured out yet how to share videos properly, so we all listened together to the tiny, terrible, tinny version of Diana Ross's version of Someday We'll Be Together, but you all were very gracious with me. And we really weren't sure what we would all be in for, were we? We didn't get it yet. And it's fitting now to take a moment and mark the turning of a year, more than 50 worship services, the deaths of some of our long-standing members. In this year, the movement for the liberation of Black lives has lit a nation and taken a prominent place in the lives of this community, if only to hear what next new thing is happening with our own Black Lives Matter banners. And as it turns out, on Wednesday night, the word black was again cut out from the sign number 7, Pastor Brandon's sign, if anyone's keeping track. So I asked Pastor Brandon to share some words with us about the sign and his hopes for our community. So here are Pastor Brandon's thoughts.
Aloha, friends. A number of weeks ago, back in early January, I heard reports about the possibility of vandalism or violence targeted towards churches that were considered liberal or progressive. And this message came with a word of caution, to be careful, to do what you could to take care of your community. And as I heard this message, my first thought was, well, what communities of faith on our island might be subject to such vandalism or violence, might be at risk because their stance for justice, their desire to stand with the oppressed and to address unjust systems is so prominent and so vocal that others who feel threatened or afraid of change might target them, might act against them. And in thinking about this, I remembered the stories that TJ was telling me about the Black Lives Matter sign and the ways it had been stolen or vandalized or taken down. And the communities, your communities, persistence in putting it back up again and again, refusing to stop being a vocal, outspoken voice against systemic racism and for Black lives. And I thought, well, if there's a community that is at risk of vandalism or violence, it'd be First Unitarian. So what can I do to help care for this community, to help support them? I told TJ I'd be willing to sit out all night, to sort of a stakeout and watch the building, see if I couldn't catch the vandals in action. That probably wasn't the best offer. I mean, I fall asleep too easily. But TJ suggested that the cost of these banners is well, it's continual. And that perhaps maybe I could help with that. And that seemed like the thing that I could do to help support you as you continue to support causes of equality and justice, human dignity, as you continue to proclaim the simple and powerful truth that Black lives matter. So thank you. Thank you for continuing in your faithfulness and your diligence of proclaiming this truth. And it was my personal honor to be able to support you as you support others. Peace be with you, First Unitarian. I'll see you again.
For those of you who don't know, Pastor Brandon is the acting senior minister at Central Union Church on Baratinia. And then, so that was Wednesday. I'd already started writing the sermon. Then on Thursday, sign number 8, Reverend Christopher's sign, who we heard from a few weeks ago, that I had cleaned spray paint off of, had the word black cut out of it as well. So that was 2 nights in a row. So I think it might be time for Reverend Brandon's stakeout, friends, but more will be revealed about that. But now in this month, when our spiritual theme is resurrection, coming alive again, there is beginning to be a realization that what we can do, or can do again, we're starting to see this. More and more of our community are receiving clearance to meet maskless in groups, maybe sing some karaoke, or even gather for travel without fear or concern. Many are doing the things they used to do, and with everything we used to do that we do once again, there is a feeling coming to many of us that is almost overwhelming. I hope Stuart, our technical ace here, won't mind me sharing that the simple act of setting up some microphones for a small event held at the church this week was kind of an emotional experience. When I asked for my lapel mic, the one you might all remember I used to wear here, the look on his face was one kind of wonder or joy that I wasn't really expecting. Neither was he, I don't think. Whoever thought that hooking up a microphone would be a spiritual experience? And I know that some of you vaccinated folks out there are feeling the same way, but most notably, I think, in this month of resurrection, of coming alive, as a congregation, you should be very proud that after the new member welcome ceremony coming next Sunday, we will have grown in membership this year by more than 10%. That is quite a feat, my friends. And things have happened also in the past year in culture that have made a huge impact on many of us. Some of us we're well aware of, some may not be. I want you all to mark a milestone, actually, that occurred for me this week, friends. In the pandemic time this past year, those of you who don't know, the number one downloaded app in the world was TikTok. You might have heard about this app in the news over some privacy or security concerns. You might be using it. The app is hugely popular the world over. And the other day, I did the thing that I will likely remember for a long time. I looked at this thing, this most downloaded app in the world during the pandemic. I saw information about it everywhere. I heard videos going viral on it. And so that fateful day came, the day I will always remember, where I said to myself, I don't get it. So instead of downloading the app and figuring it out, I went to my computer, I opened Google, and I typed in the words of the humble, the contrite, maybe the aging a bit, and wrote, "What is TikTok?" I learned what I wanted to know, but the broader lesson here was this. I can go on with my life and completely miss one of the most popular, newsworthy, important things on earth for a year, for many people. Maybe not important, but popular for sure. I just didn't get it. And as members of the Unitarian Universalist community, this should not be anything new to us. How many people here have heard this? Wait, there's a faith where we can work for justice, gather together for important events, and receive spiritual support and sustenance in a caring community, and I don't have to say I believe things I don't know if I believe? How have I never heard of this before? And it's amazing to hear people just sort of come in, find what it is they were looking for, and get to feeling right at home. But maybe as many times as members of this or other UU communities, we explain some about our community, what we do, what we believe, what we don't believe about the freedom so many of us cherish and experience here, and then we look at them, waiting for them to understand, and then we hear it. I don't get it. But what some people don't get, what is sometimes missing in ways that congregations explain what the community is like, what it does, is how the work all squares with or contributes to spirituality. Oh, I can hear some of those now, those brows knitting up right now. I can hear just as many of you yelling loudly, yes! See, in Paul Razor's book, Faith Without Certainty, Professor Razor has this to say about spirituality for Unitarian Universalists. I quote, "As much as we say we want more spirituality in our lives, we're often reluctant to go deep to find it. Part of this may be due to our traditional emphasis on rationality, which many of us erroneously place in opposition to spirituality. Another factor may be an implicit awareness that sustained spiritual practice can take us deep inside, exposing aspects of ourselves we may rather not see. But racism cannot be overcome without this work." He then looks at the work of scholar and spiritual leader Walter Wink, the famous biblical scholar and theologian, who said, and I quote, "Any attempt to transform a social system without addressing both its spirituality and its outer forms is doomed to failure. Only by confronting the spirituality of an institution and its concretions can the total entity be transformed, and that requires a kind of spiritual discernment and praxis that the materialistic ethos in which we live knows nothing about." And here, materialistic doesn't only mean the obsession of culture with perhaps TikTok or with goods or material objects to be purchased or obtained. What Razor and Wink are talking about is anything physical at all that we can touch. That material could be our body, the earth, all matter. The preoccupation many have with this material realm, at least in part, keeps us from looking more deeply at a life of the Spirit, at a life of spirituality, at a life we actually need, very practically, to face some of the spirits that are alive and well, some of those spirits that are being resurrected in new forms all the time, all around us. We spoke just last week about the rise of new voting restrictions in many states, and this week, many may not know, Arkansas passed a near total ban on abortions. Ways of living, of understanding the world are taking a turn in some parts of it, it seems, to decades ago, resurrecting many ways of thought we thought would never return. And you better believe that all forms of spirituality, or all forms of superiority or supremacy, all forms of subjugation or exploitation, all instances of abuse and harm, of pain and of suffering, have a spiritual dimension to them. In Faith Beyond Reason, Paul Razor explains the reasoning of Dr. James Cone, the parent of Black liberation theology, to say that there is not an actual devil or spirit or ghoul or ghost that literally rises to haunt people, but what is alive, what is moving, is the spirit of these ills. A spirit, an ethos, a legend, a feeling even, is sufficient enough working through, playing out in a society to require a spiritual response. My friend who helped us a year ago get started on this year of online worship, as I said, is a doctor. Today he serves a clinic on a First Nations land. In this past year, he has witnessed the devastation that disease visited horribly on the people there. The last month of intubations followed by death over and over and over wrought unfathomable pain in his own life and the life of the First Nation that he serves. And even before COVID killed scores of his patients before his eyes, the ravages of alcoholism and other forms of illness were impacting that entire community, generations of that community of elders and young persons alike. My weekend at Turtle Bay, in the rain and the hot tub, screaming Billy Joel at the top of my lungs, was a spiritual turn, a waking up to a new reality. We all literally woke up that Sunday a year ago this week to a new way of connecting spiritually to one another with the world. Perhaps preparing, perhaps unknowing that people like my friend, people like all of us would have to witness the horrors they've witnessed. Perhaps knowing we would just know sadness or aloneness in ways many of us had never known. And friends, that is all spirituality is. It is waking up. For some, it's waking up to greet yet another day we are given, to rejoice and be glad in it as another gift. For some, it's waking up to the causes of pain and suffering, to the effect of drugs, alcohol, or other painful addictions that need to be remedied. For yet others, it's waking up to one's own internalized sense, perhaps, of superiority or privilege based on the color of their skin. And others, it's waking up to the knowledge that any idea of spirit that tells another they are less than others for how they look, whom they love, or how much money they have are lying, harmful, malevolent spirits. By the way, spirituality is the way of waking up, as if from a great void of slumber, resurrected to experience life anew, like never before. And now the ice is slowly melting, friends. The sun is coming through clouds that gathered for a year for all of us. And the waking to a new life, the tune of a new song about the spirit of each one of us, each one of our lives, comes now into the chorus of all our lives. We awaken to the sound and commit to a life perhaps that means more to each one of us now. I know my life feels like it means a little more after coming through so much of this. We awaken to the sound and we commit to building up spiritual resources to face the spiritual ills laid bare by a year of struggle, pain, and strife for our siblings. we awaken to the sound and we commit to a new way of seeing, lit by the spark of a new life, kindled into the flames of spirit we will all need in the months to come, that will grow into the fire of commitment to a faith that must go deeper, must strive farther, must touch more tenderly those who are thirsting, those who are cold, those who are calling out, I just don't get it. We must be growing and to warm the way, to prepare the way for all these people that is paved with compassion, that is lit with justice, and that will lead each of them, every single spirit, every single one of us, at last, perhaps, to joy. May it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen. Please join me now in singing our hymn of reflection, Fire